Hello and welcome to Estuary TV News with me, James Dunn. On today's show, a new way to control the salt marsh in the Humber Estuary. And our guest talks to me about Family History Weekend. But first, here's Richard Morris with the news headlines.
Hello, in the headlines today, Hull is leading one of the drives to recruit Army reserves across the country, and a literature festival is taking place in Beverley. A 36-year-old man has sustained a stab wound after an incident on Beverley Road in Hull. He was allegedly asking an unknown man to get off scaffolding from the side of a building. He is currently in Hull Royal Infirmary, and police say he remains in a serious but not life-threatening condition. Armed response officers were deployed to help the uniformed police already at the scene, and the road was briefly cordoned off. Police are launching an appeal to help track the man, who is described as being between 5'8" to 5'9" inches tall. He has a slim build with black hair and silver flecks, and he was clean-shaven. He was wearing a cream top and blue jeans. Anyone with any information relating to the incident is urged to contact Humberside Police immediately. Hull has launched an Armed Forces Reserves recruitment campaign. The Be Proud Serve campaign took place on Queen Victoria Square in the city. It's all part of a national drive to recruit more volunteers as reservists. It's also to help increase the number of people across the country signing up as reserves.
We're very, very proud to welcome our friends from the Armed Forces, and they always know they'll get a good welcome in Hull, and of course they do a very, very good job in a very difficult world that we live in, dangerous at times, but they're doing it for us to keep us secure, and there's no better occupation that people could look to get all sorts of skills and further their careers.
The RNLI lifeboat station in Cleethorpes could be getting a state-of-the-art new premises. Plans have been submitted to North East Lincolnshire Council for a new £1.5 million lifeboat station built right by the sea. The new station will be able to cater for the new Atlantic-class lifeboat, which will help the team on missions on the Humber Estuary. Operations Manager of the station, Jack Barlow, is looking forward to enhancing their operational capabilities.
It'll make it a lot safer, a lot easier. They'll be able to go offshore more. You know, we deal with some pretty big vessels. We had a vessel the other day, one of the wind cats, was out on a search, the lads, for that poor chap that was lost over from the merchant vessel. And one of the wind cats got a bit too close in, and they got aground, and we went out the next day and assisted him to refloat it. Well, with a bigger vessel, it'd be just like a walk in the park, you know.
Humberside Police are reporting that they caught a criminal thanks to location tracking available in the victim's smartphone. During the disturbed burglary, a laptop, wallet, personal effects and mobile phone was stolen. Using location tracking, officers were able to find that the phone was in the North Hull area and quickly arrested the man matching the description and location on suspicion of burglary. Charity fundraisers are thought to have raised thousands for St Andrew's Hospice in Grimsby. A cycling trip went from Southport and finished in Grimsby as part of the Coast to Coast Challenge. They covered 150 miles in 3 days. The group was made up of 7 members and have all previously done tours all over the UK, Belgium, France and Spain. If you want to help the hospice in the future, then there are spaces for 2 Land's End to John O'Groats rides next summer. Both of these will also help the hospice. Beverley Literature Festival is now underway at venues across the town. Authors from around the UK and some international stars are on show doing talks, creative workshops, children's events and more over the 10 days of the event. And it's a Norwegian author that may prove to be Beverley's star turn.
I'm particularly excited about our Scandi crime novelist who is coming over from Norway specifically to appear at this year's Beverley Literature Festival. Tor Remberg has something of a cult status back in his home country of Norway, so it's quite a coup that he's making this journey for one night only to come to the UK to talk to us here at Beverley.
That's all from me for now, and we'll be back with more news soon. If you have any news for us, then please don't hesitate to contact us on Grimsby 01472 315 553, or you can contact us on social media. Bye for now.
Thank you, Richard. Now, next in the show, it's the salt marsh, the green blanket creeping into sand dunes on the Humber Estuary. It's an important habitat for many species, and without it, we might not have the sort of biodiversity that brings wildlife enthusiasts from all over the world to visit. Although it's important to stop the salt marsh spreading too far. Dan Kemp found out more about a new method to control it.
Cherry Cobb Sands and Stone Creek in the Sunk Island area east of Paul have been the site of a technology trial. The new machine, capable of maintaining hard to access and manage areas, has been tested on the north bank of the River Humber.
We're trying to encourage a high tide wader roost for the birds that live on the Humber. So when the tide goes out, they're feeding on the mudflats, these bare areas that people think, what's the value in that? Well, that's where the birds feed, that's what the ecosystem of the Humber is, part of it. When the tide comes up, they need somewhere to sit, simply. And they would traditionally have sat on the marshes. But what's happened over the years, we've contained those marshes by putting flood defences in around the Humber. You know, and that clearly worked last December, as we all saw, when there was this huge tidal surge. But the vegetation has grown up on those marshes, and the birds don't have any areas to sit on. Now we're trying to graze those areas with commercial livestock, so that again there's an economy from the farming side, but we're also trying other methods, and cutting it to reduce the height of that vegetation is one method, but it needs specialist kit, and that's what we're trying here today.
This machine behind us is a 330 horsepower machine. It's the biggest probably in the UK at the moment, and yeah, they're fairly unique. And then they're probably the next step. Historically, probably this land base, when dry, was managed by tractors, and then prior to that, sheep and cattle. And yeah, we're hoping that the introduction of this machine will attract both contractors and large wildlife bodies to invest in them for management of their own areas.
The new technology is needed as the land on the salt marsh around the river is difficult to maintain and is often covered in debris and wet, meaning traditional tractors struggle on the ground.
We were contacted by a gentleman by the name of Will Osgerby, who was interested in seeing whether or not this machine would be able to help him with the management of his ELS and HLS land on the coastline here.
The salt marsh here, it's in a HLS agreement, a high level stewardship agreement with Natural England, and we have to manage it in certain ways to keep varying levels of wildlife at certain points. So it's trying to keep the sward heights to a level, and the economics in sheep and everything else don't allow us to do it with animals. So this has been a good way to achieve our goals, really.
Definitely interested in using it's how commercially viable it is for somebody to use it and make a business out of it, and how much land around the Humber can this be worked on. But how do we link this work of this equipment with the agricultural environment behind the bank that still needs working on?
Dan Kemp, Estuary TV News.
Thanks, Dan. Now, next on the show, we're going to be talking about family history. Many of us want to find out more about where we came from and the lives of our ancestors. And with modern technology making more and more information accessible, more and more of us can become our own personal historians. But you do have to know where to look. Here with me today I have Tim Davies, librarian at Scunthorpe's Central Library, to talk about Family History Weekend and what's going on. Tim, thank you very much for coming in today. So you've worked in Scunthorpe for how long?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. Tell me, is it more and more common that people are taking interest in where they came from?
It's certainly very common. Perhaps not more and more common over the time that I've been involved in it in North Lincolnshire, but certainly I think the rise of the rise in interest does coincide with things like Who Do You Think You Are on the television. But as you said in your introduction, it's interesting to know where we come from, both as a nation, but also as individuals and as families. And I think people often perhaps reach a time in their lives where they begin to think, actually, I'm interested in where my grandparents came from and their parents before that. And it gives you a connection both to the individuals concerned, but also to the place where they came from. Quite a lot of people that we see do come from the local area, the south of the Humber or Lincolnshire. But some people equally come from quite long distances to come and use some of the resources that we have because their ancestors moved away for whatever reason.
And lots of people have that curiosity, but I suppose it would be difficult to know exactly how to satisfy them. What sort of resources are available?
Well, again, as you said in your introduction, you do have to know where to look. And it sounds a bit silly to say you need to know what you're looking for before you turn up. But to a certain extent, that's true. Any information that you can bring when you first come to a library or an archive will help, and will help the members of staff point you in the right direction. Names, sounds obvious, but names, dates of birth if you have them, any sort of anecdotal evidence from other members of the family. I know that not everybody always talks to all of their relatives, sometimes there are problems, but any evidence of that sort that you can gather before you come will help.
And quickly, what sort of resources, where would you look for these things once you have this information?
There are various things, and I brought some print-off examples here. The most obvious one, the one that people will be familiar with perhaps from the television, is census returns.
Yeah.
There's a census every 10 years, has been since at least 1841. Most libraries have access to the ones between 1841 and 1911. The ones after 1911, you won't get the detail on an individual level, which is what family historians are after, because you have to wait 100 years for that information to be published. But 1911 is the last one that we have available. This one is from a little bit earlier than that, but the example of information that you can get, for example, you know what parish it's in. It often tells you what street. You have each household with a double line marked at the end of the household. I printed this one off, for example, because I was looking into the history of a particular pub. And we have here the landlord, we have his wife, they have the children, we have a servant, and we also have the in-laws, which is
that's
quite
a lot of detail. And just quickly, I mean, you've actually got some events coming up where people can learn more about exactly how to find out this information.
We have the main one, which is coming up this weekend, Friday the 3rd and Saturday the 4th of October, is our Family History Weekend. It's a free drop-in event between 10 o'clock in the morning and an hour before the library closes. So that's 4 o'clock on Friday and 3 o'clock on
What might you learn
Saturday.
there?
Come along. If you are a seasoned family historian, you'd be very welcome. If you've hit a brick wall and you just need an extra pair of eyes to look over what you've got so far, then there's members of staff and volunteers on hand to help you. If you're just starting out, you'd be equally welcome. As I say, bring along anything that you do have and we can point you in the direction, show you how to use the census returns, show you how to use the trade directories and all of the other stuff that we have.
Great, and quickly, we are running out of time, but there's a couple more events coming up for people with an interest in local history, aren't there?
Yes, indeed. We've got a whole autumn of history going on, vaguely related to the First World War, but not entirely. But the two talks that we've got coming up are, next week on Friday, we have They Did Not Grow Old. That's a talk about teenage soldiers in 1918 in particular who were conscripted, joined up, volunteered, went over to the front line, knowing full well what they were letting themselves in for. A quarter of them died. So that's with a Yorkshire historian called Tim Lynch. And then the week following we have a local archaeologist from Lincoln talking about tanks that were made in Lincoln. Some of the first tanks, so that's the landships of Lincoln.
Oh, brilliant. And that's on Thursday the 16th of
Thursday the
October.
16th.
And presumably people can find out more online.
www.northlinks.gov.uk/libraries.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thanks for coming in. That was very interesting. Now, I'm afraid that is all we've got time for on tonight's show, but don't forget that if you've got some stories you want to share with us, please get in touch. Our number is Grimsby 315 553, but you can also get in touch via Facebook or Twitter, Estuary TV, or email us on news@estuary.tv. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.